Rockets, I'm Ashley Brown.
And I'm Kevin Eady.
And this is the news for January 17th, 2014.
Our top story, in a new report by the FBI, San Antonio is now rated one of the safest cities in Texas. Alamo City was unofficially known as the drive-by capital in the 90s and is now ranked the 10th safest large city in the U.S. Austin ranks as the 4th safest and El Paso ranks number 1.
The Rocket basketball team defeated the Wagner Thunderbirds 72-58. Tuesday, they faced off against Smithson Valley and they won 67-37, making their 21st consecutive win. They are now ranked first in the state. Let's go out to the basketball games and support our Rockets.
There will be no school on Monday in recognition of Martin Luther King Day. In a time where there was widespread racial segregation in much of the U.S., many sought to change that. Dr. Martin Luther King was in the forefront of that struggle.
Here's a short video from the Biography channel that highlights his life.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929. Faith was always an important part of daily life, as both his father and grandfather were Baptist ministers. He thrived at a segregated high school, graduating at 15, before heading off to Morehouse College. He then dedicated 3 years to theological study at Crozier Seminary in Pennsylvania. While earning his graduate degree at Boston University, he met Coretta Scott, who he would marry and have 4 children with. King and his family settled in Montgomery, Alabama, when he became the 20th pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. When Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to relinquish her seat to a white man on a Montgomery City bus in 1955, the incident lit a fire under the burgeoning civil rights movement.
His boycott of the bus system in Montgomery, Alabama was tremendously successful because he was incredibly strategic and he worked with other people to get the individuals in Montgomery, Alabama to understand that they weren't going to take it anymore.
King's experience, passion for the cause, and position in the community gave him the credentials to become a leader in the 381-day boycott of the city buses. On December 20th, 1956, the Supreme Court ruled segregated buses to be unconstitutional. This was a major victory for the civil rights cause and proved King's nonviolent methods of protest could yield results. King was now the national face of the civil rights cause. He was jailed over 20 times, was once stabbed in the chest, his house was bombed, and he suffered relentless personal attacks on himself and his family. For a man of peaceful intentions, he unfortunately spent much of his life the target of violent intent, yet the threats never stopped him.
Dr. King inspired thousands of people through his eloquence and through his fearlessness, especially after his home was firebombed with his wife and his children. They showed through their courage that they were prepared to give their lives to the cause of freedom.
King worked tirelessly to promote the cause he so strongly believed in. And from 1957 through 1968, he traveled over 6 million miles, delivered 2,500 speeches, wrote 5 books, and dozens of articles. His hard work and ability to communicate earned him such respect that he earned the ear of President John F. Kennedy, who personally met with King. Of all the speeches King delivered, none has stood the test of time like his famous I Have a Dream speech. Symbolically delivered from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963, in front of 250,000 people, both black and white. King had become such a force in America that he was named Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 1963. A nice achievement indeed, but it paled in comparison when in 1964 he became the youngest man ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Martin Luther King Jr. was an American. He was deeply American. And what's striking to me is that he had more confidence and faith in American democracy, in the Constitution, and in the principles of fairness and opportunity than nearly all of his critics.
While in Memphis to lead a protest march defending the rights of striking garbage workers in April of 1968, King delivered a rousing speech titled, "I've Been to the Mountaintop." It would be his last. Standing on the balcony of his second-floor room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, King was shot and killed. In 1983, Ronald Reagan signed a proclamation declaring the third Monday of every January Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a public holiday to celebrate the man and what he stood for.
One of the few advances made in the mid-20th century for equal rights were the Supreme Court decisions of Irene Morgan versus Commonwealth of Virginia in 1946 and Boyton versus Virginia in 1960, which ruled that segregated public buses were unconstitutional. However, the southern states had ignored the rulings and the federal government did nothing to enforce them.
So in May of 1961, a group of 13 people, some African American and white, launched the Freedom Rides, a series of bus trips through the American South. They departed from Washington, D.C., and attempted to integrate bus depots and train stations in the Deep South. They faced mobs, beatings, torture, and often jail time. The Freedom Riders helped inspire participation in other subsequent civil rights campaigns, including voter registration throughout the South, freedom schools, and the Black Power movement.
Yesterday, some of the original Freedom Riders spoke to students at Judson High School at the PAC.
Who was arrested.
At Judson High School, we had several members of the Freedom Riders group who were civil rights activists in the 1960s, and in the summer of 1961, they rode interstate buses, which would be like Greyhound buses, throughout the South to try to force the states to follow the federal regulations about integration. It was important for our students here to hear directly from these people because we watch videos in history and we do all kinds of things with pictures and documents, but it makes it more personal to them when they can actually hear people firsthand who were actually there and lived through this experience.
There's a whole weekend planned to commemorate Martin Luther King Day and the Freedom Riders. On Friday night at 7 at the Calvary Baptist Church on 6142 FM 78, there will be a screening of the 2010 film Freedom Riders, followed by a panel discussion. On Saturday morning at 8, there will be an MLK Unity Parade starting at Kirby Middle School and finishing at Friendship Park, so make sure to go check it out.
Well, that's about all the time we have. I'm Ashley Brown.
And I'm Kevin Eady.
And this has been J-Rocket TV.